Hello everybody and welcome to another Simutrans video. Today we're going to be travelling up the East Coast Main Line, first on a slow service to Peterborough and then a fast service from Peterborough to Leeds. I think this is the last major main line out of London that we haven't seen yet, which is something of a milestone. The reason that the East Coast Main Line has come last is just because it wasn't really worthwhile building any of the major trains on this route, the East Coast trains, until York was built, and York's only been built relatively recently. And I didn't really want to make a video until we had a full timetable running on the route. And now what you see is the full timetable. The only thing that we don't have running on here at the moment is Grand Central trains with their occasional services to Sunderland, Bradford. The main reason for that is simply just because they are so occasional. I think the services to Sunderland and Bradford run only about every 4 hours each, and it's difficult to run something so occasional on this map. There's a few places where, faced with such a timetable, I've just made the services run more often. For instance, the Heart of Wales line I think runs every 3 hours on this map, which is a bit optimistic by the real world timetable, and I'll have to do something similar in the far north of Scotland with the Wick trains and perhaps the Cardiff Lockhurst trains. I'm not exactly sure how often they run yet. Speaking of Scotland, that's what I've been working on mostly recently. Having finished the northeast of England, I've been building the central belt of Scotland. An awful lot of trains to put in around Glasgow. Most of the local lines around Glasgow Central are done now, and eventually we'll get up there and see some videos around that area. But enough talking about things that we're not looking at. Let's talk a little bit about the East Coast Main Line. The main challenge on the south portion of the East Coast Main Line here was just getting the First Capital Connect services like the one we're following and the East Coast services to work together in harmony, because sometimes you have to make sure that the fast trains get through a certain junction before the slow trains, and that just requires a little bit of tinkering here and there. Other than that, the East Coast timetable is fairly regular, clock face, and wasn't too difficult to implement, unlike something like the First Great Western timetable, which took a bit of creative thinking in the southwest. The East Coast one has been relatively low maintenance in comparison. One thing I have noticed is that north of York, the trains can only just about keep the timetable from York to Darlington, Durham, Newcastle, which is interesting because mostly on this map, although things almost run exactly how you'd expect them to, it tends to go the other way. If there's any kind of error, it's on the side of things arriving a little bit quicker than they would in real life. Not significantly, but enough to notice in some cases, and enough for me to have to tell the trains to wait in a couple of places on some lines. But north of York on this line, it's the opposite. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it's kind of interesting. We're coming up to Peterborough now, which is a station I know quite well. I used to change here quite a lot. If I had £1 for every hour I've spent waiting for a delayed train on platform 4 to Leeds or Norwich, then, well, I'd have enough to maybe buy a round in the pub. But you'll notice when we arrive at Peterborough station that this station is not exactly up to date. So I've left a label there for myself reminding myself to add 2 new platforms. So I noticed when I went through this the other week that the new platforms at Peterborough have now opened. So there's a new island platform at the west end of the station, but this is the old layout, and I'll eventually get around to updating this to the new layout. So we've vacated the slow train at Peterborough, and this train just coming into Peterborough now will be our fast train to Leeds, and the next stop will be Doncaster. It's a fast one that doesn't stop anywhere between Peterborough and Doncaster. I've put a couple of cuts in this section of the trip between Peterborough and Doncaster, just because there's a lot of open countryside without much going on in the East Midlands. As it turns out, we'll be going through Grantham and Newark and Retford, but other than that, there's not an awful lot to see. So I mentioned that I've been working on services in Scotland and around Glasgow. So what that means is that I'm getting towards the end of the work on this map, really. Once I've done the Greater Glasgow services, we'll definitely be rounding the final corner and onto the home straight. There is still quite a lot I want to do with the map, though, even once I've finished with everything up to the far north lines. Lots of the map has not yet received the visual upgrades that you see in the videos with, the connected tracks and updated vehicles. You'll have noticed that some of the trains we saw along the way, like the East Midlands trains class 158, has not yet been graphically updated in the way that I did lots of them last summer, so some of that's still got to be done. And given that there still seems to be some room for performance on this map, I might add some of the principal bus routes that operate in areas where there aren't adequate train services. I'm also likely to spend some time on other Simutrans projects. You'll probably remember that I've mentioned in the past that I have a map of the Balkans, which is a different goal to this map. Instead of trying to simulate the actual service, I'm kind of creating a fantasy rail map there, and I might make a video about that at some point. I've thought about it in the past but never quite known how to approach it. I've got a couple of other sort of inchoate Simutrans projects as well. Those of you who read the Simutrans forums will have seen my experimenting with a very, very detailed scale simulation of New York City, which is something I might go back to at some point, although I may wait for certain upgrades to the Simutrans engine before I try doing that properly. I've also been experimenting with something similar of the London area. One of the only sort of deficiencies of this map is that in some areas in London you have to squeeze a lot of things in, put stations underground and so forth, and having a really detailed map of the London area, which is actually something that's been done before in Simutrans but not for a number of years. There are more tools with which to do it to a fuller extent now. I might have a go at that as well, because I am a glutton for punishment. So approaching Leeds now, where this service will terminate, and we'll have another video at some point looking at the East Coast Main Line north, probably taking a cross-country train from Leeds to Edinburgh, sort of continuing the journey. But until then, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and tune in next time.